Hello and welcome to episode 60 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by Chitty's Cheesesteaks. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, along with my co-host and MMO executive editor, Mike Mayer. And Mike, a historically disappointing 2023 Mets season has finally come to a close. A lot of change going to be coming now from the end of this year to next year. Spring training is going to look very different, it seems like, with the people in charge. But before we get into all that, I just want to get kind of your grade of the season overall. I have a feeling it's not going to be very high, but kind of just your thoughts overall on the season here now that we've come to a close.
Yeah, I mean, anything other than an F, right? Wouldn't make sense. An F for failure. That's the Mets, Cohen, Epler, whoever, all combination of everyone went out and put a team together with a lot of money. Just didn't work out. I guess if you could say the one saving grace of the season is that they made the decision at the trade deadline to sell, and I think that they did a pretty good job doing that. Obviously, that doesn't help for the disappointment of 2023, but I think what they were able to acquire, the pieces they were able to get, some of those are probably going to be in the big leagues in 2024 and certainly beyond. So I guess that's one of the only positives you want to take away from what happened this year. Francisco Lindor looks like a legit superstar. Pete Alonso still hitting a lot of home runs. We got to see all the baby Mets. Certainly, I think it's pretty complicated to go over all of them because I wouldn't even say Alvarez had a good rookie season, but there was certainly a couple of months where he just completely disappeared, which I think is a little bit of a concern going forward. I mean, he again, he hit a lot of home runs, but there wasn't much else in his offensive profile that was very impressive. But he looked great defensively.
Sure.
So Kodai Senga being an ace, one of the best pitchers in the National League. It took us maybe a minute to talk about the positives there. It's just, unfortunately, there weren't a ton from the 2023 season, and I don't think many Mets fans expected to be sitting here on Wild Card Day, the first day of the playoffs, not seeing the Mets or knowing that they were going to see them later if they had a bye. So definitely them just not being here is a disappointment, but I think that was quickly washed away, right? And that's what we're going to talk about, I'm sure, for most of the show, is how kind of quickly that's washed away with the hiring. Not completely washed away, but it at least becomes more of an afterthought now that David Stearns has finally been hired.
Yeah, I mean, we'll obviously get into Stearns in a minute here, but, same sentiment as far as the season goes. You got to give it an F. There's really nothing else you can do unless you want to give it a B for bad investments. You can label it like that. But, I know everyone before this year always talked about 1991, the worst team money could buy, all that. Unfortunately, I think this team tops that. Sad, but listen, we talked about it at length this year, just as far as, it's tough to build a team and be successful very quickly when you build it mostly on free agents like that. The Mets tried to fill the gap between, that long-term sustainable winning from within and, bringing in free agents to bridge kind of that. And last year it worked out, and this year's group of guys, it didn't. It's unfortunate, but like you said, they made the most of it in the sense that they took advantage of a seller's market at the trade deadline, and they really revamped their farm system in a couple of days, with a couple of key trades there. So, from that regard, the future should be built up there. It's disappointing any way you slice it, right? Like you said, it's wild card Monday or wild card Tuesday today. And obviously, come April, Mets fans would have thought that they would be at the least planning that, or else, as division winner, whatever. But, not the case. Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander will help in the immaculate grid as Mets with other teams now. So if there's a plus, we could take that. But it's onward and upward here. It's tough, but you tease it there for a second. Obviously, yesterday the Mets wasted no time with the season being over and announcing David Stearns as the new president. Stearns, I thought, did for talk about the day ones, right? The press conferences, they win day one or not. I thought he said the right things. He obviously made an emphasis, which we'll talk about a little bit too, just as far as how he expects Pete Alonso to be their opening day first baseman. He made sure to say something like that. Obviously, didn't touch on specifics with free agents because it's his first day on the job. He's not really going to do that. But outside of that, obviously, I feel like before that, I guess we should probably talk about Buck not returning for 2024. I call it firing, whatever you want. They obviously wanted to do what they could to make it as honorable as possible for Buck, leaving the organization, whatever. He was manager of the year last year. Sounds like he's not going to retire. He's going to maybe interview for the Giants jobs and possibly, the Brewers vacancy this winter, whatever's kind of available. So, before we dive into Stearns, I do just want to get your thoughts on something that we're probably not surprised about, but Buck not returning for next year.
Yeah, and I think kind of the way I want to talk about this was, and you said honorable, and which I thought is the way that the Mets handled it. They really didn't have a whole lot of options because Stearns was getting introduced the next day, and then the playoffs start, and Major League Baseball is very firm on the fact that they don't want you to announce press conferences, any of that stuff, once the playoffs start, particularly the first couple of days and the back end of it. So the Mets kind of were in a short window here of making a decision on Buck and then introducing Stearns. For some reason, there's a lot of some of them are beat writers and other people that write about the Mets throwing hit pieces out there about how poorly the Mets handled this, and I just don't understand how that's the case. Look, Buck, great, he won Manager of the Year. That's a good personal award, but it doesn't mean much in the end. I mean, we could go over the last 15, 20 Manager of the Year awards if we wanted to and see how many of those guys are still even managing, more or less, even more had they won any rings or anything. So it's just, that's a nice award for him to win. It doesn't mean much in the long run from a team standpoint. And look, he won that because the Mets were really good for 9/10 of the season, right? And then the most important part of the season, they weren't. Buck struggled. We went over that at ad nauseum about his struggles with the bullpen, and he showed that again this year. And look, this isn't something new with Buck. This is the MO with Buck. That's one of the issues both of us had with hiring him. That's one of the issues we had with him last year, even with the Mets winning 101 games. Sure. We still took him to task with that and made sure that we mentioned it. And he struggled this year with it too. I mean, there's a lot of close games that you can point to, at least one or two bullpen decisions where you're like, what is Buck thinking? It just didn't make sense. So look, the Mets won one playoff game in 2 years with the highest of expectations. Regardless of whether you're a respected manager like Buck is, you're good with the media like Buck is, that you're going to be in hot water at the very least, and on a lot of occasions going to be fired. The Mets decided that they wouldn't use that wording to kind of protect Buck and to let him go out with more respect, and they decided that they were going to let Buck handle it however he decided, which is highly unusual. And they did that because of the respect that they have for Buck, because of how long he has spent in this game, how many times he's managed in this game. And so all these weird hit pieces, or some of the weird comments I've got on Twitter about calling what the Mets did dishonorable or a hit job or anything else like that. Look, there's the Mets severely underplayed this year, and Buck's not the only one to blame, but he's the manager, so the blame is certainly going to hit him. And that's what happened. I think the Mets handled it fine. They let Buck handle it the way he wanted to,
Hmm.
and Stearns couldn't comment on it that day. And I think he did the right thing, and that was the first thing he mentioned in his press conference was that he had reached out to Buck
Hmm.
first day that he could, and he did that. Steve Cohen acknowledged, look, Steve Cohen said this is, even if they had thought about keeping Buck, he just didn't feel it was right because this is the first
Hmm.
president of baseball
Yep.
operations in Mets franchise history, and the first thing you want to do is strap him to a lame duck manager.
Right.
It just wouldn't make any sense for Buck to stay. It's just, I mean, maybe it would have made sense to, and maybe they did offer him like a special assistant type role, something
Right.
like that.
Right.
And it's possible they did, or it's possible they talked to him about that. And maybe Buck's like, he's got that itch now that he's been
Sure.
back in the game, and maybe he wants to manage
Yeah.
or have a role in a different organization that he spent more time with. So I think, like you said, it wasn't any big surprise. Once Stearns was hired, that this just felt a matter of if, when, how.
Yeah, and listen, I agree with you, and it's a weird thing no matter what. I mean, we know that Buck also another knock on Buck, especially for this year. He doesn't rely on rookie players really at all. You saw that this year. He played to the back of the veterans baseball cards to ad nauseum to a fault at times, obviously. So feels like this was probably another added layer to that. That he knows it's going to be a young team, that sort of thing. And you hit the nail on the head of something I was going to bring up. When you bring in new management, you bring in a new general manager, new president of baseball operations, new front office, right? Typically, they bring in their people. They hire their people. This is what happens in sports. It's not new. It's not gonna not happen ever again. That's just how it goes. It's just with any job, right? You want to bring in your people that you trust and that you want to build a rapport with. And I think we understand that. I feel like fans probably, I've seen more upset the fact that they felt maybe Epler should have been fired over Buck because of the way he constructed the roster. And I agree with that to a point. I'm not the biggest Billy Epler fan at all, but like we've talked about, what he did at the deadline probably extended him at least for another year. And also with the president of baseball operations coming in, Billy's probably going to be the voice, the face, so to speak. But at the end of the day, Stearns is going to be making the decisions. He's going to have final say. So, that you take with a grain of salt. And, I thought they did the right thing. What else are you going to do? They didn't say they fired Buck. They let him announce it, like you said. They gave him a nice little tribute there on the last day, bringing out the lineup card. And also, the other thing is this was Steve Cohen's pick, right? Cohen wanted Buck to come in. So I'm sure if he felt there was any real positive way to keep him around, he would have. But, he did the right thing, and he did the smart business thing, is which someone he's coming in now to run his business, to bring in his people. And, it'll be interesting now. And the other thing is I like that they did it right away, because now Stearns has a clean slate. He doesn't have to kind of sit on his hands, and you can hire the folks that you want to hire. This actually brings us to a transition and talk about managers now.
I want to point out that you made a really good point too. Another thing with respect, letting Buck be able to do it before the game, so that he got to do the lineup card. He got the standing ovation. The fans got to give him the support that they chose they wanted to give him. The players got to give him the support they were able to do. So again, I think that just kind of keeps going the trend of the Mets did the respectable thing and did the right thing for Buck. So yeah, I think that was a good point.
Yeah, no, listen. I feel like we're as fans, we're always the first ones to kind of bash them, not bash them, but like get on them when they don't do the right thing when it's easy. They did the right thing here. Not only cutting bait and trying to bring in a new direction, but again, just letting him announce it. I thought that really there was no reason to be upset. I know some of the WFAN guys were upset. Whatever. I don't know what else you could do. You bring in somebody new that's going to run the team. This is how sports go, and not just baseball, any professional sport. So it's nothing new. I'm sure fans are frustrated because they probably wanted to see Buck win with his pedigree and everything else, which I understand. But the way this team is moving now, they're getting younger. The front office everywhere, and it's probably going to be in the dugout now as well with whoever Stearns bring in. But I guess that's a good kind of transition talking about candidates it seems like, and it's obviously unofficial, we don't know, but like you're putting betting odds on who might the favorite be for 2024. It feels like the guy managing Milwaukee right now is probably the front runner. Obviously, we know Counsell and Stearns' relationship over the last few years in Milwaukee. Counsell hasn't talked to any team specifically. He's on the contract, but he has said he's obviously going to take interviews because he's not going to be on the contract in the winter. So I'm just kind of curious your thoughts there on Counsell and just kind of, how soon. I guess a lot of that depends on how certain managers do with teams in the playoffs and what happens, but how quickly you think the Mets can maybe come to a resolution on somebody that's going to run the dugout for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think Stearns has said it, and other reporters mentioned it, that they're going to cast a wide net. And I think that's the right thing to do, right? This is Stearns' first real opportunity before free agency or right around free agency starts. This is really his first chance to add his touch to the organization. And so I think he's going to be deliberate, and he's going to bring a lot of folks in. And yeah, sure, if Counsell doesn't re-up with the Brewers before talking to teams, of course the Mets are going to talk to him. He's one of the better managers in baseball, and one of those reasons he's so highly regarded is one of the faults we talked about with Buck. Counsell is seen as a guy that's very good in game, particularly with a bullpen. And that's one of the most important things, right? Knowing when to take your starters out and which relievers to use in which position now. That's one of the most important things that a modern manager does. So the fact that Counsell is very good at that is obviously a huge positive. And yeah, I think you got to believe that the Mets are going to want to talk to him, even if there wasn't the Stearns Counsell connection, that they hadn't worked or they had worked together. They'd be talking to him anyway because he's going to be the best guy available if he hits free agency. I know there's some other, I mean, we'll hear other names too. A lot of the names that are popping up already are like names that we heard that have hit recently. Joe Espada from Houston, but he might finally get the Houston job.
Sure.
Dusty might be on the way out. Melvin, if Melvin gets fired from the Padres, I think that the Mets they talked to him previously when they actually were trying to hire him before they hired Buck. Clayton McCullough, the coach from the Dodgers, is a name that I've heard. Again, they interviewed him last time. This is a guy that you talk about experience with young players. He worked in player development for the Dodgers for 5 years. So, and now he's a coach on the major league level. So this is certainly a guy working under Dave Roberts, and another very good experienced manager. He certainly seems like a fit. And there'll be other names. I know we'll be talking about Carlos Beltran until it doesn't happen, or it does happen. And
Gabe Kapler, I've seen. Kapler got let go from the Giants.
Kapler, I would stay very far away from Gabe Kapler if I was the Mets. But yeah, of course, that's a name we're going to hear. He was just fired. We're certainly going to hear his name, and I guess it's possible that the Mets bring him in for an interview. Pat Murphy, bench coach from the Brewers. Again, the Mets interviewed him. And obviously he has a connection to Stearns, so that's another name to watch. Ray Montgomery from the Angels is a name that I heard to watch out for. But yeah, we're gonna hear a lot of names in connection with this. They're gonna interview quite a few people for this position over the next couple of weeks, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Brewers do this, kind of see like how it plays out, how it happens, kind of the time frame of anything. But to put a bow on it, like I said, it makes sense for the Mets to cast a wide net, and Stearns to make sure he does this deliberate and make sure he does it right. He doesn't know a ton of folks in the organization yet. He wasn't allowed to talk to anyone until the other day when he was hired. So he said they were going to start doing meetings right away so that he can sit down with players, coaches, scouting, front office, anyone and everyone, so that he gets a better idea of what manager that he's looking for, but what also fits with the group that they have or the potential players that they're going to have. So I think it'll certainly be interesting to see all the names that pop up.
Yeah, and one name, I'll just get it out of the way now because I know somebody will pop it up. I know Wally Backman left the Ducks. He's not going to manage the Mets. So let's get that out of the way right now because there's a couple people are going to say, bring Wally in. No, thanks. We're good.
I've already seen it mostly if you read comments on like a Facebook on any of our posts about managers. It's Wally Backman. Why haven't we brought him back yet? Now's the time. Not happening, folks.
Not happening. We'll nip that in the bud right now. Yeah. But one thing you mentioned that's a good transition also, just as far as Stearns wanting to meet with people in the organization, players talking about, get their feedback, things like that. We found out, obviously, Lindor has been a huge advocate of Buck. We know that. But apparently Pete Alonso took the news really, really hard about Buck not coming back, like to the point where it's rumored that he wanted to go to Steve Cohen that day and talk to him about it, which obviously, you don't love that. But, I appreciate the passion. And that's, I know we put a ball on Buck, but like I will give him that credit. All the players love him. They love playing for him. And I just want to give him that. They all, no one ever seemed to dog it or anything like that. But I wonder, how now these negotiations go with Pete, because like he's bringing a new manager. I wonder if now Stearns will sit down with the guys like him and Lindor and, try to understand, what they liked about Buck and someone maybe that they could bring in that has that same temperament, whatever. It's just going to be very interesting now because with what obviously Stearns said, he addressed Alonso in the sense that said he expects him to be his opening day first baseman. So I just wonder how he's going to try and build this relationship quickly and well enough to obviously make a deal happen this winter and keep him happy.
Yeah, I mean, beyond picking the manager and kind of those other quick staffing things that they want to do, I think Pete Alonso is certainly right there that Stearns is going to want to address. He's going to want to talk to the Mets and analytics department. He's going to want to talk to Steve Cohen to get a number that he's feeling about, and then talk to Pete and his representation. And the Mets are certainly going to want to, I think, have a firm grasp on the situation pretty quickly because it changes their offseason quite a bit, right?
Sure.
So if they talk to Pete and they come up with a figure of what they want to give Pete, and Pete just doesn't come into that stratosphere,
right?
Then yeah, it makes sense to trade Alonso, right? You don't want to get nothing for a player like that, or they could decide to ride it out, right?
Right.
You also want to win in 2024.
Sure.
And Pete Alonso is one of the best sluggers in the game, so you could decide to ride it out. But I think knowing Stearns and kind of his background, I think if they were unable to do something, they would certainly look to see what you can get for him. But yeah, Stearns said right now, Alonso is his first baseman for 2024. And he listed all the reasons beyond just being a slugger is that he's a great guy in the clubhouse. And look, Pete's an emotional guy too, right? And you get an emotional attachment to a manager that cares a lot about you.
Sure.
Buck was great about that with the players and making sure they knew how he felt about them. So it's not surprising to see that kind of reaction from Alonso. And yeah, I think this is something they don't want to linger. Stearns want to get the manager done, hopefully get a resolution with Alonso done so that they can really work on making sure they focus on bringing some new players in.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to disagree with you as far as just even if they can't get a deal done, I'm apt. I'd want him signed long-term this winter. I want that out of the way. But if they can't, I'd be more apt to just let him play out his contract, kind of like what the Yankees did with Judge and kind of play with it there. My feeling with Pete is, and again, we've talked about it, market value. We know he's not the defender that an Olsen and a Freeman is, so he's going to have to come down a little bit. But I look at what the production he brings to that lineup, and they have nobody waiting in the wings that you could say would be able to replace that production. I just wouldn't want to. And I know I joke about high and bloom, and that was a lot of ownership at the time, different things. But I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. And I know you agree. It's just like that situation where I just think Mets fans and the organization would really feel his presence missed once he wasn't there. So hopefully they do come to a deal, but let's say they can't. I'd be more apt to, because they, like you said, they do want to try and contend in 24. Let him have his walk year in New York, and you kind of let him test it in free agency. You go from there. But obviously,
No,
Stearns.
I think that makes sense too, what you're saying. And simple fact that Stearns also doesn't want one of the first things
Sure.
like you're talking about with Bloom.
Yep.
One of the first things he does is trading away not only a great player, but a fan.
Right. Absolutely.
A guy that kind of embodies everything that a New York fan wants, right?
Right.
So, yeah, that would be a really weird way to start, even if they weren't able to come to some. So, yeah, right. That makes. I was trying to think of like Milwaukee, David Stearns, and like what you would think he would do.
Right.
But look, it's going to be different, right? And I think that's going to be an adjustment period for Stearns too. Is he's got money to spend now, right? He doesn't just make these deals in the trade market and everything like that. He doesn't have a whole lot of experience with the owner being like, hey, you can sign this guy for $500 million, which is like likely a number that Cohen's going to say he can give to Ohtani, right?
Sure.
Or something like that. So that's going to be something new for Stearns that he has to kind of get used to and work.
Yeah, and again, Stearns should let you do your due diligence as a GM. Obviously, I'm not saying it like that, but just you're apt to keep your star slugging first baseman, even if you can't. You let it ride this year. Just unless you can. There's some, and we've talked, unless they get blown away, right? But again, you look at his production and what the Mets will lose out of that. You really would have to be something they totally get blown away and fleece a team, which honestly happened. But hopefully they just get the negotiation over this winter. If they want to do it around my birthday in December, that'd be a nice present, but I won't force them. Like I said, I think, as the day one press conferences, all that goes, I think Stearns did a good job. It was cool. Obviously, he addressed his fandom as a Met fan growing up, and he understands the ups and downs, the pain, as he was talking about. So I think fans should be excited. It's a good day for the organization. This is an organization under Cohen now that's going to have a real long-term direction, which we should be excited about. And, it should be an interesting winter, not only, with the manager search and putting now a staff together, but just, players that they're going to try and bring in and things like that. It should be very interesting now, but they have someone more than competent and with a long-term vision at the helm. And I think we should be happy about that.
Yeah, I think after watching the presser and live and then rewatching it just to make sure I got all his quotes and going through that and then watching him talk to Steve Gelbs on SNY after, and it just felt different for me compared to the recent GMs or any baseball decision makers that they've had doing these type of press conference. Look, we know he's smart. He graduated Harvard, right? We know that. But we've also found out in the last couple of weeks between reports and talking to people and different stuff that he's also extremely good people person.
Right.
And that showed. And he also showed very early on that he's going to have no issue fitting in with New York fans. Look, he used to sneak into Shea Stadium.
Right.
I mean, for Mets fans to be able to connect with that, I mean, you now have an owner that's a Mets fan, both Steve and his wife, and now you have David Stearns, who is a Mets fan. I mean, it's really easy to be able to connect with them, and that's not always easy when you're talking about a millionaire owner and then the lead decision maker. But I think it goes beyond that with just listening to him talk during his press and just like him saying that there's no special sauce. Like after Moneyball, some people thought there was some secret recipe or something like that where you could just do this and you were going to win. I thought it showed a lot of humility from him to be able to say that and to know that the way that he builds or hopefully builds a winner in New York is going to be different than he built a winner in Milwaukee.
Right.
Like we said, with the resources that he's going to have at his disposal. So, yeah, it's going to be different for him. And I think he said all the right stuff. Certainly made it seem like he's going to be doing everything the right way and hoping that he brings a winner and a continuous winner to the team he grew up loving. Yeah, I didn't. There was nothing in that entire press conference where I was like, "Well, why do you say that?" Or that didn't make a lot of sense. Like there's still even Billy Epler. There's certain things that he said, like when he was talking about Mark Vientos coming up, and that the fact that he didn't have enough innings in the minor leagues, stuff like that. That was that. Look, there wasn't anything from Stearns on that accord yet, and I just think there's a reason why people were telling Steve Cohen this is one of the best guys in baseball. And he's still young. He's still absorbing. He's still learning from everyone around him. And he threw Omar Minaya out there. That went an intern with the Mets, that he worked with Omar Minaya and the stuff that he learned from a scouting aspect from Minaya. Like, we know that was Omar's strength.
Absolutely.
Scouting standpoint, so that we know that this isn't going to just be analytics. This is going to be David Stearns building a balance in this organization that all the best teams are doing now, right? It's more than just analytics and plugging in the numbers. You have to get those analytics to the players and make sure that you're using them in a different way, in the way that best provides them a better chance to be successful. And I think Stearns is going to bring people in he trusts to do that. And I thought overall, I just thought it was refreshing to hear what he had to say.
Yeah, it's exciting. Like you said, he's a smart guy. That's evident. It's obvious. And his passion for coming here, being a lifelong Met fan and kind of wanting to be full circle for him and making this, consistent winner should be exciting. And I think you hit the nail on the head as far as everything we've heard about him being a good communicator. And as far as the secret sauce, right, there isn't, but it sounds like communication is the thing that is the common denominator. So I'm excited to see him as a communicator and the staff he brings in to relay the information that they're using to make these guys successful as they can. I think he's going to do a good job with it, and pair that with Cohen's resources. I mean, man, you have the makings of Dodgers East Coast over here. Hopefully it'll happen sooner rather than later with him. But it's, exciting stuff, and, should be a fun winter here. But I think that's going to wrap everything up for this week. Thanks everybody for listening all year. Obviously it was disappointing, but we have fun every year doing this, following the Mets, and we're hoping that 2024 will be much like 2022. But between now and then, we'll keep you updated on everything in the off season. We'll catch you next week, and as always, let's go Mets.